Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever and wherever you happen to be listening to this. Thank you for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja based event and wedding photographer, Tavishima Ayede. Today, I'd like us to look at a question, and the question is, what are spec driven businesses? The reason why we're bringing that up today is because in the last material that we went over, I mentioned um, that the sale of inverters is a spec-driven business. So I'm sure that there might be a few newbies over here who are not familiar with those terms, and so we're going to explore that today. What spec-driven businesses are, whether uh, we self-employed or business people in the event or wedding space are also spec-driven, and whether there is any value to be had from thinking about, well, basically from adopting the same worldview that our colleagues have, those people who are in the more technical side of things, because they are the ones that see the world through this kind of lens, through specs, specifications, and things like that. So let's get on with it. So, what is a spec driven business? Spec driven businesses or industries are industries where technical specifications have to be met before a project is successful. So, of course, we can see that would apply to folks in engineering. I mean, that is really spec driven. You need X number of metric tons of cement or X number of tons of steel. Um, the tar, has to be made to, whatever inches or thickness or whatever. The bitumen has to be of a certain kind of grade, and on and on and on. It's all about the specs. Spec-driven industries are also includes people in the software space. You need the software or the app to be able to run on iOS this, or on Windows that, or on Mac this, or on Linux that. So it's spec-driven specifications. So spec is short for specifications. And then, of course, we have people in the agro-allied space, and those industries are also spec-driven as well. Because you have people who want to buy sesame, for instance, and so they want to buy sesame seeds between, 2 to 3 millimeters, white sesame, not brown, and this and this and that and that. And so, those are specification-driven businesses, spec-driven industries, because because all these specifications have to be met, or else it's not going to be successful. So if you're in the engineering space and you didn't build everything up to spec or up to code, then not only have you violated your contract, but there are also liability for health and safety things in the future. And it's the same thing for software. You don't live up to if what you delivered is not up to spec, then the software crashes, and of course you also have liability issues in the future, maybe because people lose data and what have you. And the same for people in the agro-allied businesses. If you don't deliver sesame that's up to spec, it's not going to be fit for purpose, and you're going to get yourself a nasty reputation as that guy who just delivers goods that are subpar. Now, does that apply to those of us who are in the wedding and the event space? In my own opinion, not necessarily so, because the makeup artist is not worried about technical specifications per se. The makeup artist is primarily an artist. And so, well, maybe you say there's some technical specs involved because maybe ruby red is not the same as maroon or whatever, but I think that's as far as it goes. Because beyond that, the makeup artist is going to be concerned about the artistry involved. It's going to be a matter of judgment per se. Yeah, judgment, familiarity, and expertise. And so that's the reason why I can look at a woman with makeup and say, wow, that's a nice bang-up job. And then my wife looks at it and says, nope, that's absolutely rubbish. And that actually happened to me a few times. We've been done for a shoot, and I thought the makeup artist was quite good. And then my wife looks at it and she's like, no, this is not a good job. And then we argue about whether it's a good job or not. And then, lo and behold, delivery, the client looks at the photos and she's not happy with the makeup. So I guess since women are much more familiar with these sorts of things, they would have a better sense of what makes a good job or not. But since men, we don't know the vagaries, the niceties of stuff like this, then we don't know. We're not familiar. So makeup artistry, that's an art. Photography, is that spec driven? Not necessarily so, because the photography is also an art. So yes, there's technical specifications that have to be met, whether you shoot in RAW or JPEG, the format you deliver. Maybe the client has particular preferences about the kind of apertures that you use and things like that. But that's as far as it gets, because beyond that, the photography is going to be a matter of taste, style, artistry, and things of those natures. So we can't really say that people in the event space are spec driven. Most of the people in the event space, because if you look at event planners, the considerations would be the same. Event planning, yes, there's a science to it when it comes to people management and things like that, but it's largely an art. The extent to which your event planner can bring your event, your dreams, can bring it to fruition, can bring everything to scale. It's largely a matter of artistry. Now, of course, there are some people in our industry, in the event and wedding space, that are highly spec driven, and those are people in what's it called? The protocol people. So, like for lights, yes, there's an element of artistry involved, depending on how you run the lights through a mixer and stuff like that. But a wedding planner who, knows her chops or his chops would be able to look at a venue and say, okay, we're going to need lights of, so setups at this point of the hall. We might need a truss because the lights might be too heavy or too light or whatever. So lots of technical specifications come into play when people are rigging up the lights, when people are rigging up the sounds. And then for people who have to run all the wiring across the hall to make sure that everybody has power and things like that. So yes, those people are much more concerned with the technical aspects and the specs. But you find that the rest of us, cake people, makeup artist, photographer, event planner, who else? Sorry, I can't think of any other event professional right now. Oh yes, the MC, the DJ. Those are largely matters of art and artistry. So, are we in the event space spec driven? I would say no, in the proper sense of the word. Now, should we be spec driven? I would say the answer has to be yes. Because for people in the technical space, they know that they cannot give a quote or agree to a contract or step up to the plate to execute unless they have a proper understanding of what these technical specifications are. So we, as event professionals, also need to be aware, concretely aware of what our customer needs are before we worry about giving a quote or before worrying about whether we can fulfill it or not. So we need to know what the creative vision is. For instance, I am an old school kind of photographer. I don't do Photoshop and none of that jazz. So I pretty much achieve my creative vision with whatever it is that I see on the day. Now, there have been times in the past when I've had to turn down particular gigs because of the level of Photoshop artistry, the level of gishbound that is required. And since it's not something I can fulfill, there are times when I've had to turn that down because much earlier, when I was involved in the business, a whole lot earlier, there were times when I've tried to take gigs like that and it has turned round to bite me in the bum. So I try and get a sense of what the specs are, what vision is this bride or groom, what are they working towards? Is that something that I can fulfill or not? And it's the same with you, the makeup artist. You need to understand what the vision that they're aiming for as well. So let's see, where was I? Okay, yes. It's also the same for wedding planners. We need to understand the specs. What are the customer needs? What do they want? And what is the creative vision that they are working towards? Now, how do we get a sense of what the specs are before we deliver a quote or get a sense of whether we can step to the plate or not? The usual questions that we all ask, we all ask the date of the wedding, the number of the guests, the vision for the wedding day, what the desired outcomes are, and of course, in our particular niches, there are a few things here and there that we have to pay attention to. For instance, we photographers, we always have to ask before going in what the no-nos are and what the things are to avoid. People who should not be in shots, certain kinds of shots that they don't want, things like that. So, in a summary, yes, we should be spec driven. We should try and find out what the specifications, what the criteria for success are before we put in a bid and before we step to the plate. Now, the reason why this is important is because for our brothers and sisters who are in the more technical industries, engineering, software, and agro-allied industries, one thing that they know is that if you deliver a quote without doing the spec work first, it's going to lead to disputes in the future. So if there's a bid that says work on the highway, work on the airport road, and you just tender a bid of 1 trillion, because that sounds like a huge number, without looking into the specs, without realizing the grade of bitumen, the length of the road, estimating man-hour requirements, what else, fuel for the diggers, the trucks, and everything, then you're going to run into a lot of a problem, because you would have signed a contract, you are on hook to deliver, but you find out that you have grossly underpriced what it is that should go into successfully fulfilling the contract. So that is the same attitude that we should take as wedding industry professionals. There's no point in giving a bid if we haven't done any spec work. We need to do the spec work first. We need to find out. So you wedding planners, forgive me, I'm not a wedding planner, so I don't know what kind of questions are relevant, but you need to ask all the questions up front. Do you guys want Egyptian cotton or Lagos linen? Ask all the questions so that you get a sense of what it is that they want to get out of the day, and the ideal vision that they have out of the day. It is then that you will get a sense of what kind of ushers are needed, what kind of entertainment is needed, what the lighting is going to be like, what kind of support staff that you're going to need. That's for wedding, for speaking about wedding planners now. So we need to ask all those questions. And so I think that's it for today. So what is this, in summary, what's a spec-driven business? Those are businesses or industries where technical specifications are really important, and you have to meet them in order to declare that you have completed the job successfully. So engineering, software, agro-allied space, other industries like that. I'm sure you can use your imagination. So primarily, those of us in the wedding and the event space, we are not spec-driven, but the philosophy is a useful one to have, because we need to know what our customer wants, what our customers need, and what their ideal vision is. We need to know the goalpost for determining success at the end of the day, so that we can give an adequate quote to reflect the level of effort and expertise that is going to go into the gig, and also so that we increase the likelihood of getting good satisfied customers and good referrals and reviews and what have you. So thank you very much, guys, for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based event and wedding photographer Tavishima Ayide. I'll catch you guys on the next episode. Thank you very much for listening.